Hey guys, I'm Amira and welcome to Open Up. This is your communication podcast and I am your host, also known as the communication expert. I'm your podcast host, your life coach, and also a speaker. Each and every single week, I'm going to be bringing you conversations to help you level up the way that you communicate, whether that's with yourself or in your relationships. Through each conversation, you're going to leave with food for thought, skills that you didn't know you needed, and ways to develop your relationships. So join me here as you learn the lessons that you didn't get to learn at school. Pull up a seat and join us as we open up. Hello, and welcome to today's episode. Whether it's your morning, your lunchtime, your evening, if I'm joining you on your commute, this sounds like actually a promo ad. It wasn't meant to. It was just to say hi and welcome back. And I'm so excited you're here for another episode. Now, the news is that this is the last solo episode in season 5, but we're not sad because we have packed this season with so many incredible guests and what I hope are solo episodes that really get you to reflect, but do something differently as well. So I actually want to invite you to do 2 things, 1 thing, but 2 questions. I want you to reflect so far on the episodes that you've listened, whether it's this season or it's been earlier seasons, and I want you to identify what's one thing that you've learned. Like, what's one thing that you're taking away? One thing that you might even go and share with a friend. The second question, maybe even more importantly, is what are you doing differently? You know that I love to put in frameworks and tools and practical things that you can actually implement into your life. So what is it? Let me know. You want to DM and let me know? Please do. You want to tag me? Also let me know. Maybe you want to tell a friend and you don't want to tell me. Equally okay. Now, I also have to say, welcome to anybody that is new, that's listening to the podcast for the first time, and this might be the first time you've come across the pod. So welcome if that is you, wherever you are joining us in the world. Now, today's episode is one that I have not touched on for so long, and it is coming up again and again in my client sessions. And it's also something that I'm really going through at the moment as well. And for anybody that's new and listening to the podcast or listening to this episode for the first time, a really big important thing for me is that we grow together. And sometimes I think, oh, have I shared too much? But the whole point is that we're open and we're having these conversations together. And I really want us to grow together and learn from each other. And I know when I'm talking to some of you in my DMs, you give me ideas as well, and that's the whole point of having a community and being able to thrive off each other. So today we're looking at the world of friendships, and I know when I started the business and also the podcast, I wanted to look at all types of relationships, and it starts with you. So we do so much work on ourselves, and I don't ever want that to stop, because without that awareness and without that focus on what can I do differently, where am I growing, it's going to be really difficult to then look at your other relationships. But once you're starting to look at yourself, we also want to look at your professional relationships, which is your work and your career. And last solo episode, we really focused on that. And also, I want you to look at your personal relationships, and that is when you're dating, that is your love life, that is with your family. And today it is most definitely around your friends. Now, I've done an episode before around friendships and specifically about friendship breakups. Today we're going to do a slightly different deep dive into it, but we just haven't given this enough airtime this season. And with my clients in their sessions, in some way, shape or form, this is a recurring theme at the moment. And I think there's so much on the table that's not said. And I don't think that we look at our friendships in the same regard that perhaps we look at our romantic relationships. And sometimes it can feel just as heavy, or it can feel just as difficult to navigate a friendship breakup as much as it is a romantic one. So I want us to explore this. And especially as well, there is so much out there at the moment around your friendships changing, like past your 20s, or like how they grow in your 20s. But I also want to say your friendships change at so many points in your life, like regardless of your age. Yes, through your 30s, but your 40s and your 50s as well. And what are we doing about it? How are we navigating those? So I'm going to be giving you my shares today and my personal examples. Some probably a little bit more recently than I would like to admit, but I want us to take us all on this journey together. And let's look at our friendships, because they are really important. And what are ours saying to us at the moment? What are they giving us? Which ones are really healthy and we love and we want to have in our life? And which ones perhaps we're like, oh, going to keep you at a distance, actually. So in today's episode, I've broken this down into 3 myths about friendships that I want to bust. And I want us to have the space today to be able to do things differently in our friendships. Now, my friendships this year are something that I'm saying this because if any of my friends listening, they're going to vouch for this, and they're most definitely going to call me if they don't agree with this. However, friendships is my part of my life that I really want to nurture this year. And I know that over the last few years, I perhaps haven't given it the love that I would like to. And there's so much research out there that also supports why our friendships are so important for us, and it's a really important connection. Now, I think there's quite a parallel in me saying that, because on the one side, it's a really big part of how we live a happier, healthier life, and we know as humans we need to feel connected. But at the same time, where are we perhaps staying in friendships because we don't want to be alone and we're scared to actually enjoy, or we haven't quite learnt yet how to enjoy our own company? So it's kind of 2 sides of the same coin. So as I'm nurturing my relationships, specifically my friendships this year, which I hope I'm going to get so much better at, I want us to bust some myths. I want us to look at things differently. And I want you to do a little bit of a stock check on your friendships. Like, what's working for you? What isn't? And what do we need to reframe in our brain? Like, what are these myths we've been carrying around about our friendships that we don't need anymore? Okay, myth number 1 that we are busting is that you don't need to have a BFF. Now, despite what social media tells you, I'm not saying don't have one, and I'm not saying there's a bad thing if you do, but if you don't have one, I don't want you to feel the pressure that you have to have one. And this is speaking from somebody whose friendships have massively, massively changed over probably like the last 3 to 6 years. And I think, and it's interesting actually, because somebody messaged me really recently and said, Amira, I've just listened to your episode around your wedding and how you planned it and what went into it. And they were like, I'm not even getting married. So the fact someone's not getting married and has taken so much away from that episode makes me super happy. But as an example, in that episode, I talk about not having bridesmaids, and they said for them, hearing it was really refreshing. Now, I'm sure there's people that are going to listen to this episode and be like, how could you not have bridesmaids? And I'm very much around each their own, like do what is good for you and honor what's important for you. But where my friendships have changed so significantly over the last 3 to 6 years, I didn't feel that I wanted to necessarily like rate my friendships in that way and say, okay, you guys are my inner circle and this is who I want to be or who I want to have within my bridesmaids group. And I think as well, a lot of the company that I keep now and the people that I would determine to be my friends are my inner circle. And I think that's probably a lot of my friendships. So it's first of all to bust this myth and to invite you to say that if you feel the pressure of having to have a best friend, because we know the pressure that labels can give us, this is to challenge that and to say that you don't have to. It doesn't mean that there's something bad about you. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong. And I know, for example, if I look at my partner and his friendships versus mine and my friendships, they're completely different. And he, for example, has got I'd probably say like 3 core groups of friends or friendship groups. And within each group, there's like 8 people or so, and he's close to every single friendship group. Whereas for me, my friendships have really shifted and changed, and I've got all my friends, but they aren't a collective, or they might not have all met at the same time. And so I have a lot of different friendships with my individual friends. So the structure of it looks really different. And I think sometimes, which will lead me into myth number 2 and 3 that we're going to bust, so I'm not going to overlap them, but I think sometimes we latch on to an idea of what our friendships used to look like growing up and feeling like that's the way that they should move into our adulthood, and they don't have to. Myth number 2 is that longer friendships or having a friend for a longer period of time doesn't equal better. So can we please, I was going to say cancel that equation. Is that a thing? Can we cancel that? We need space for allowing so many different types of friendships into our life. So let's kind of take it back to how our friendships tend to evolve. Now, usually they've started from nursery or from school or from quite a young age. And usually our friendships are formed because we spend quite a lot of time with our who then become our friends, right? We go to nursery together, or we go to school where we eat together, we play together, we have our classes together. And that often goes through your school life. And if you've gone to uni as an example, that kind of continues as well. And even if you didn't go to uni and you went to work, a lot of us often become friends with our co-workers because we spend so much time together. Now, that doesn't mean that's the only reason, but it's a really beautiful way of where we can connect with other people. And on top of that, the more you tend to see someone, and this isn't me saying that these are the best friendships or the better ones, but it's just really talking about where do those initial or those earlier friendships come from, and why I do not believe that the longer you've been friends, the better the relationship. That doesn't always stand in good stead at all. But it is to get you to think about where those early connections come from. And not only is it through spending time together, but it's also through like shared experiences. So I know, for example, I can think about my uni friendships, and in the last couple of years, they've really, really shifted for me. And we've been friends for 15 years. And that's because as well, like where that friendship started was where we were all studying. We spent so much time, not just studying together, but partying together, cooking together. It was our day-to-day life. We also had the shared values. So we were there to study, we were there to get our qualification, we were thinking about what's our next career move. So there was a lot of synergy at that time. Now, sometimes as you then evolve and like your day-to-day doesn't look the same within your friendship, a few different things can happen. For some of your friendships, you'll move away, you won't be in close proximity, but there'll be some of your best relationships because that connection is still there, whether it's a friendship where you speak daily or where it isn't. And for other relationships, it's actually, well, you aren't really in that space where you have the same shared values. And so it starts to look different. So something that I had to really work through when I was in my 20s was this notion or this belief that if you were my friend, you were going to be my friend for a whole entire lifetime. Like, I don't think I ever thought about losing a friend. I thought if we were friends, I was loyal until the day I was going to die, and therefore we were going to be friends forever. I mean, sorry to all my previous friendships, because that's probably pretty claustrophobic. But what I had to really get comfortable with is just understanding that just because I've had a friendship in my life for 10 years or 20 years, it doesn't mean that I need to have them in my life for another 10 or another 20. Now, there's loads of different dynamics to this because it depends on how healthy that friendship is, where you both at. Do you feel like it's similarly weighted? Or do you feel like the balance is out of sync, where one of you is constantly giving and the other one is constantly taking? However, I'm speaking on it from a space where I wasn't even willing to entertain the idea of losing a friendship because I felt that needed to be my friendship for absolute life. And what I had to really learn and understand is that some people are in your life for a season, and some are for a reason, and some are for a lifetime. And so many of my different friendships have taken on such a different form. But if we're attached to this idea, like I was, that they have to be in my life forever, what we're actually doing is we're missing out on creating space for new connections to come. Now, I know as an adult, it can feel pretty scary about making new connections. And I recently read a statistic that it actually takes, I think in adulthood, around, I think it's just under 200 hours of like contact time to make new friends. Now, that isn't just like a surface level friend. That's somebody where you feel like quite deeply connected to. And that number is significantly higher in adulthood than it is if we were like at school together and as kids. And so sometimes the reason I'm sharing that statistic is because sometimes we're holding on to friendships that either we don't have anything else in common, we feel like we're the only one giving, and actually it's not serving you anymore. And it's okay to make new friendships. You don't only have to hold on to the ones that you've had. And sometimes there is a part of your life that connected you or drew you together, or where you had that shared experience and that shared value. And I know as well, if I think about a really recent example for me, is going from being employed to self-employed has changed my life significantly. And whilst it's something I will never, ever want to trade out for anything else, because I truly love it and adore it no matter how hard it gets, is that it's taken an impact on my relationships and most definitely my friendship. I also read, actually, this is a very pessimistic, I think, or negative statistic, but I read that divorce rate is like the highest amongst entrepreneurs. Don't think I wanted to read that at the moment. But the point of it is because of the lack of perhaps time as entrepreneurs that you put into your relationships. Now, I'm not saying that's an excuse, and I've had to call myself out recently and say, not having time isn't an excuse for me not to nurture my friendships. I have to actually take a look at my life and say, what are the connections I want to nurture and I want to build, and why? Why is that important to me? Using being busy or running a business as an excuse isn't okay. We're all busy. Does everybody's life with busy looks really different? So a few points there. I've kind of gone off on piece, but a few things I wanted to pull out under myth number 2 is, so time doesn't equal better. You don't have to keep a friendship in your life just because you've been friends for 10 years. And it can be so incredibly difficult to, what I call, grieve that, because it is like saying goodbye to somebody that you feel knows you really well, where perhaps you don't even have to explain why you've done something because they instantly know. And it can often feel like a breakup. But actually, if you're holding on to relationships because either you don't want to be alone or you think you won't make any new friends, then it's a good point to kind of check in with yourself and say, why do I want this connection? Am I willing to nurture it? Maybe I've given so much in this relationship and actually I don't feel that this is an equal match, or I don't feel like they're able to meet me how I want my friends to be able to meet me at. Myth number 3 that I want to bust is that the expectation that friendships should stay the same. Now, we are going to grow as individuals and we are going to go through different seasons. So why do we have the expectation that our friendships need to stay the same as well? It's kind of a disservice to yourself and also a disservice to the other person, because sometimes it's all right for friendships to fizzle out. Like, sometimes you don't actually need to have the hard conversation. That doesn't mean avoid it, but sometimes things have a really natural way of just ebbing away and allowing it to fizzle out. You can make peace with that. And so I think there's space here for so much nuance and lots of different ways of approaching friendships, depending on what yours are giving you right now and where they're fulfilling you. Now, we know human connection is so important. And there's a study as well, I think a really, really famous one, which followed a group of men who graduated from Harvard around for 60 years. And essentially it came out with the result that the people you surround yourself with are incredibly important. And so this is why we want to put this love and this nurture into friendships, but creating space that our friendships that we might have created at uni or in the early days of our career, one, they don't have to look the same as you evolve and as you grow. And for some of those relationships, it might mean that they do fizzle out. And as you have different shared experiences, that you no longer have that much in common, which kind of leads you to the point where you're not as compatible as you used to be. Really similar to a relationship. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I also don't think that there's anything wrong with understanding that as you go through different seasons. So when I go back to the fact of like my early days of starting the business, that was a really new season for me. And I claim it as my ghosting period. I ghosted a lot of my friends and my head was down and I really was in my survival mode of trying to make the business work. Now, I'm not using that as an excuse, but what I am saying is within your friendships, that doesn't mean that your friendships might not last. And I can definitely say, one, I know who my friends are and who have kind of gone through that really difficult period with me and they're still here. And I also know some of the friendships that perhaps over that period I've also let go of, but also understanding that the way my friendships look now, perhaps even versus 5 years ago, looks really different. And do I always perhaps hang out and have the time that I used to? And likewise for them with me as well. A lot of my friends have kids. So does the time that we spend together look the same? Is that connection always the same? No. But I think we need space for it to look different. So it might be you get together once a month, but that is your quality time where you go and do something together that's super fun and that's where you feel super connected. It might be that you don't see each other that much and you don't even speak that much, but when you do, you know that you feel so grounded with each other. So I think that there is so much space for us to understand that, yes, some relationships and friendships are going to come to an end. Some are going to change and grow, but also we haven't even spoken about the new friendships that you get to welcome in when you do create space. And I know something that's come up so much with my clients at the moment is where they're looking at their friendships and they've done so much of their inner work and they're growing, and I'm really proud of my clients. I'm always proud of them, but particularly at the moment. And what they've started to realize as they're really leveling up the way they value themselves and their self-worth is actually they've got some friendships still in their life where the other person doesn't try, the other person doesn't keep in contact. And actually they can feel that they're constantly the one that's pushing. And they kind of get into a stage where they're realizing, I don't think I want that friendship in my life anymore. And the beauty of it is it doesn't have to be a bad ending. It doesn't always have to be tough. But if you can make peace with allowing them to evolve and not perhaps prioritizing those types of friendships as much, you're going to create space for those new connections. So let's just talk about how do we make some of those new connections, because I know it can feel so hard and so tough. And I think something that I've realized about myself as well is, well, one, I know that I'm very much an extroverted introvert, and I think a lot of people are surprised by that. But I know that I really do need time on my own, and I love it and I do crave it. However, I have to really catch myself out and make sure that I'm not essentially becoming a recluse and staying at home. And especially as well, where so much of my workday can be at home, if I'm then going to meet my friends in the evening, I know it can be so easy for me to bail and be like, I'm so tired, which isn't an excuse. So a few different things here. One, where are you making time for nurturing the friendships that are in your life? And where perhaps are your friends not nurturing your friendships, and where perhaps you want them to? Where do you need that connection with them a little bit more? So this isn't about cut everybody out and it's not healthy and go make loads of new friendships, but actually look at the ones that exist in your life right now. Where can you make more time for them? And I know that is something that I am doing so much work on this year. And the other thing I want to come back to is those new connections. Now, I know it can feel super cringe and really, really cheesy when I say, okay, well, what are you interested in and what are your hobbies? All right, go and join your local running club as an example. Of course, I'm going to use running as an example. And I know, for example, at Track Life London, where I'm there every single Monday night, is we have an incredible community. But I also know that so many people have come and started their running journey on their own, and at Track have connected with new friendships where people have got married and been invited to each other's wedding. And again, it's about finding those new connections. But whilst it might be easy to stay at home and think, oh no, it's easier to miss out on it, you've got to take action. You have to do something differently. And I always say, think about striking up like a conversation with a stranger, because it's in those small moments you get used to starting a conversation and not having this whole fear. Usually we've got this fear of rejection of, oh my God, I'm going to start a conversation. Somebody's going to feel like I'm being too much, or you're worried about how you're going to be perceived. But actually making new connections, it doesn't always mean that you're looking for a new BFF, but actually you might create space for somebody else that you haven't thought about, or a new type of friendship. And you can have different types of friendships in your life. You might have your friendships that are there in your day-to-day. They know your ins and outs. You might have your friends that are on completely different sides of the world, but you know that when you are connected, they're the most nourishing relationships for your soul. And maybe you're in a stage of your life where actually you want to make new connections, and that might come from a different stage in your life. Maybe you've just gone through a breakup. Maybe you've even moved house to a new area. So I want you to revisit those friendship myths that we busted and know that it doesn't always have to be hard navigating friendships, but it's natural for them to change and evolve. And don't forget to welcome in the new ones too. Guys, thanks for joining us for another conversation this week. You know the deal by now, so please hit subscribe, leave a review. Don't forget to share this with a friend. And if you want to come and hang out with me, then click Instagram. You'll find me at _communication expert.